Today on BRStv Investigates, we'll find out if there's an added benefit to using a recirculating skimmer with two pumps over a more common single pump skimmer design, as well as how they compare to each other in performance terms of air draw, stability, and ease of tuning, in order to determine if the juice from the recirculating skimmer's independent pump design is worth the squeeze. Hi, I'm Randy with this Friday's BRStv Investigates, where we put popular reefing gear, theories, and methods to the test by experimenting on our own tanks so you don't have to experiment on yours. And in today's experiment, we're putting recirculating skimmers to the test by pitting two different skimmer designs with the same Varios 4 DC skimmer pump against each other to see which has the higher air draw, how that air draw is affected by water depth, and which one's easier to tune. The numbers on this test will probably surprise you as we try to answer the question, is a recirculating skimmer more stable and easier to tune than a single pump skimmer? Before we get started in today's data, let's quickly refresh ourselves as to the differences between a single pump skimmer like the Reef Octopus Regal 200 INT and a recirculating skimmer like the Regal 200 EXT by looking at the commonly believed benefits and challenges for each one. So what is a single pump skimmer? Obviously, these types of skimmers have one pump, but it's the mechanics of what that single pump is trying to accomplish that really distinguishes them from recirculating skimmers. That single pump feeds both water and air simultaneously into the skimmer body, meaning that it's in charge of producing the bubble reaction or air draw, as well as the contact time or how much water flows through the skimmer per hour. One of the benefits to having a single pump pulling double duty is that they're typically a smaller form factor that saves space inside your sump, and even more space saving when manufacturers place the pump inside the skimmer body itself. Along with having a smaller footprint and a single pump, in most cases, also that means that manufacturers can keep production costs down, which can ultimately make them more affordable and easier on your wallet. However, there are some challenges that come with a single pump skimmer in that there is far less control over making individual adjustments to just the air or just the water flow, since the two are tied directly together from one pump doing both the work. Tied to that is that both variables for air and water flow are also affected by sump water level, meaning that almost any change to one of these three variables, airflow, water flow, or skimmer depth, will impact multiple elements at the same time, which can turn the task of properly tuning a single pump skimmer into a game of performance whack-a-mole or a juggling event where tweaks to any one of them ultimately affects the others. On the flip side of skimmer design are recirculating skimmers, where the duty of drawing in air and bringing water into the body is split between two different pumps. First of all, the recirculating pump does exactly that. It recirculates an air and water mixture inside the skimmer body to create foam. The skimmer feed pump is in charge of contact time and how much tank water is processed per hour. Recirculating skimmers can be both used internally and externally, in most cases with the same benefits. Independent pumps means independent controls. Second benefit is the ability to control the air without affecting water flow through the skimmer, so a bit more or a bit less air is adjusted by you. The skimmer is essentially a foam engine, and ideal engine performance can be achieved when the right ratio of organics from the feed pump and air from the recirculating pump is also achieved. Similar to a car's combustion engine, you don't get more horsepower when adding more fuel or oxygen individually. You get better performance when you add more of each in the right ratios. Either way, you can tune it to your own system and feeding habits or bioload. With all of these levels of control, the recirculating skimmer is the more tunable design, where you have full control over the airflow, water flow, contact time, system volume ratio, and water height, which all can be adjusted with almost no effect on each other. In some ways, we can think of a single pump skimmer as being similar to a carbureted engine that is simpler but easier to flood, whereas a recirculating design is similar to a highly tunable fuel-injected system that can be optimized to nearly any available amount of fuel, or in our case, fish waste, uneaten food, and organics. Alright, so that's at least the theory behind the two skimmer designs and how they operate. So let's put it to the test in two phases. In the first phase today, we'll put the Regal 200 INT and Regal 200 EXT, both with the Varios 4 DC skimmer pump, to the test in 5, 6, up to 11 inches of water to see how the air draw in each is affected by sump water level. Along with that, we'll also cycle the DC pumps through its 5 different settings to see how the air draw changes with pump speed. Next week in phase 2 of this test, we plan to set up 3 different test tanks with skimmers set to 3 different airflow rates and start dosing actual organics for a better look at how different amounts of air draw inside the body affect performance, which is the heart of this conversation. Getting into the results for today's testing in phase 1 of our experiments on skimmer design performance, let's first take a look at how operating depth affects the air draw rate for both the Regal 200 INT and Regal 200 EXT, which both again use that Varios 4 DC skimmer pump. Like we've done in previous tests, we placed the 200 INT and 200 EXT in 5, 6, 7, and up to 11 inches of water and measured the air draw at each level. Starting with the 200 INT, which is the single pump skimmer design, we see that from 5 inches to 11 inches, the air draw performance is absolutely affected, where there's a highest amount of air draw at 921 liters per hour at 5 inches and lowest amount of air draw at 11 inches, coming in at 468 liters per hour. Overall, there was about a 49% loss in air from the lower operating depth to the higher, and it looks as though the sweet spot for this particular skimmer is in those lower sump water levels and probably where I would personally install it on my own system. Taking a look at the Regal 200 EXT in a similar test, which utilizes the Varios 4 pump in a recirculating configuration whose sole purpose is to draw in air, immediately we see hardly a change at all in air draw from 5 inches all the way up to 11 inches, where there's only a difference of 17 liters per hour from the highest measured air draw to the lowest, and with similar numbers throughout the operating depths, it's easy to see how splitting the job of air intake and water flow between multiple pumps creates even more stability regardless of how you install it in your sump. One of the most eye-opening results we're seeing here between these two skimmer designs is how much more air we're measuring on the recirculating skimmer over the single pump skimmer, where the dedicated air draw pump draws in over 36% more air versus the single pump dual duty design that averaged 705 liters per hour across all operating depths. To demonstrate this max air draw average between the two skimmers even further, we placed each one in 7 inches of water, then toggled the DC pump settings through its 5 different pump speeds and tested the air draw again. Starting with the Regal 200 INT single pump design, we tested the lowest of the 5 settings to draw around 17 watts and an average airflow of 283 liters per hour. Power setting 2 tested at 22 watts and 441 liters per hour. Setting 3 tested at 28 watts and 590 liters per hour. At 33 watts in setting number 4, there was 705 liters per hour average air draw, and at the highest 38 watt power setting, we see an average pretty close to the first test of 811 liters per hour. Across all 5 power settings, we measured an average of 566 liters per hour air draw. Looking at the Regal 200 EXT recirculating skimmer, which tested the same wattage draws for each power setting, we see an increased airflow at each of the 5 settings from 436 liters per hour at setting 1 to 1080 liters per hour at setting 5, meaning that the total average air draw overall for the dedicated pump came in at 790 liters per hour, or 40% more than the single pump design. So with adjustable DC pumps like these, we can see that there is an added layer of adjustability for both designs, and that you can simply push a button to reduce the amount of air draw, but just keep in mind that in the single pump design, a reduction in the amount of pump speed not only reduces the amount of air, but also reduces the amount of water flow speed through the skimmer. For similar skimmer designs using AC pumps, the same effect is achievable for recirculating skimmers, where you can simply install an air valve on the recirculating pump and open and close the valve to let more or less air into the body. Yet on a single AC pump skimmer, controlling the air draw with a valve in a similar fashion creates a situation where every reduction in air will have a corresponding increase in water flow and decrease in contact time. We actually tested this ourselves using 3 Red Sea RSK 300 skimmers that utilize the Seache PSK 600 AC pump, with them tuned to 150 liters per hour, 300 liters per hour, and 600 liters per hour respectively. Visually, you can see the higher flow rates going through the skimmer where the air was turned down to 150 liters per hour. There was definitely less air, but way more water flow, which ended up pushing more microbubbles out of the skimmer body and into the tank. So while you can tune airflow to some degree on a single AC powered skimmer pump, be aware that you might be flushing more bubbles out of the skimmer at those extreme ends of tuning. After seeing today's data between all these skimmer types, it's pretty obvious to me that the increased levels of adjustability from a recirculating skimmer design doesn't make it harder to implement and use on a tank, particularly with those with push-button DC adjustments, but rather it makes the filter or foam engine more tunable to my particular system and in turn easier to dial in properly, which is why I'm rating today's question of, is a recirculating skimmer more stable and easier to tune than a single pump skimmer? A 10 out of 10 on the Reef certainty scale, but we're not done yet. Phase 2 of today's testing is just around the corner. As I mentioned earlier, there are some challenges associated with each skimmer design, both recirculating and single pump skimmers, where for the recirculating design, there's typically an associated cost increase. For many reefers, whether it's your first tank, second tank, dream tank, or all of the above, the costs can be a major point of consideration for not only the equipment you decide to use on your tank, but even the impact alone on your living space and where your tank will ultimately be placed so that it still provides enjoyment for you and those who see it, while also being in a place that's structurally sound and makes things like tank maintenance easier to perform. If you want to see how Ryan plans to approach this very challenge on his own 360-gallon dream tank in his home, check out yesterday's video from the ongoing BRS 360 series.